Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Now, our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Doug F. from Woodland Hills.
Hi, my name is Doug, and I'm an alcoholic. Boy. I'll start out by saying that I don't have a pitch. Well, probably be more interesting if I read yours. But I don't have a sort of standard speech. I have a story, but it's mine and probably not interesting to anybody but me. So if I say something tonight that you don't like or don't agree with, what I did right before I got up here to talk was I prayed to God to put the words in my mouth. And so if you don't like what you hear tonight, please blame God. Don't blame me. I got to Alcoholics Anonymous a little over 17 years ago. I was involuntarily committed to a mental hospital. And sitting in the mental hospital on a locked ward without my shoes or my belt, which they'd taken away from me, I wondered in a moment of clarity how I'd gotten there. I mean, it was not my life's ambition to wind up involuntarily committed to a mental hospital. I mean, I had been an ambitious boy. This was not one of my ambitions. King of the world was my ambition. And you know, in all honesty, I came close. I came close, king of the world. I did. And it just wasn't good enough, you know? Now, I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I had no idea that I was an alcoholic. I mean, I got high every day. I drank a quart of alcohol every day. For many years, by the way. Many, many years. But I didn't know I was an alcoholic. But I'm in this mental hospital, and they told me I was crazy, so I thought I was crazy. And if you looked at my life at that time, you would have concurred. You know, I was crazy. I did crazy things. Well, I used to drive like this. Now, a normal person will tell you that's crazy. But see, to me, I had to drive like that because there were twice as many lanes if I didn't drive like that, and I wasn't sure which lane I was driving in. See, it made sense to me. It wasn't crazy at all. It was very logical. You know, I started drinking as early as I can remember. My mother would give my brother and I what she called wine coolers, and this was many, many years before Bartles and James or any of those bottled things. It was a bitter red wine and some Canada Dry ginger ale, and she would give it to us at dinner parties so that we would get drunk and pass out and leave the adults to some serious drinking. Well, I never passed out. Ever. And I would go back for more and more, and you know, by my third one I was just getting started, and I was dancing and I was singing for everybody. And I found out that getting attention made me feel good, because most of the time I felt bad. It's the only way to put it. I just felt like I didn't fit anywhere. I was terrified pretty much all the time. No matter what group I was in, I always felt like everybody in that group knew something that I didn't know, but they were all worthless. At the same time, you know, I felt better than everybody, and I felt not as good as anybody. My sister describes it as, we feel like the piece of shit that the universe revolves around. And that was me. That was me. And in my family, you know, I was terrified all the time. And I grew up in a family that there wasn't a door that hadn't been broken off its hinges by my father trying to get at my brother or me, or my brother, who was 6 feet tall, weighed 180 pounds in the 6th grade, trying to get at me. So I was terrified a lot of the time just being in my house. But even without that, I felt like I didn't fit. You know, I felt like my skin didn't fit. That's really what it felt like. I felt like I just didn't fit. And when I drank that wine cooler, round about the third one, my skin fit perfectly, you know, and I was Sammy Davis Jr. And you know, and I'd entertain you, and you'd give me attention, and that made me feel good. And I learned that very, very young. Those two things, altering my normal state and getting attention, made me feel good. Or at least it made my skin fit. And I got high from the time I can remember. I mean, the first thing was alcohol, but I used to build models, and it's a quick crowd. You're 2 steps ahead of me. Yeah, I used to sniff a lot of glue. People have called me a smart guy. You know, have said that I'm really smart. Too smart for my own good. Imagine how smart I'd be if I hadn't sniffed all that glue. I mean, it's shocking, because I sniffed a lot of glue when I was a kid. It was a cheap legal high, you know, and I hadn't, you know, heard about any of the other illegal ones. And alcohol I could only get when my parents were having a party. And the other way that I got out of myself was through fantasy. I had this vivid imagination, and I would fantasize these wonderful things, like what the world was gonna be like for me when I was king of the world. You know, when I was sitting up there and everything was mine. When I could have anything I wanted. And when everybody was looking at me. And I lived many years like that. And I started to do stuff toward that end. I started acting at a very young age, and playing music. And around about the time I was like, well, when I just turned 14, the Beatles announced that they got high and on marijuana. And I heard the word before, but I had no contact with it. I didn't know any black people, and those were the only people who I thought did, and I didn't come from a racist family. It was just that's, like the hip, cool jazz guys were the guys who I heard did marijuana, and I didn't know any. So I couldn't do any marijuana. But when I was 14, and I heard about this, and here was some hip white guys doing marijuana, a friend of mine's brother told me that he could get me some marijuana. And I said, yeah, do that immediately. And so he did, and we smoked it. The night I smoked marijuana for the first time was the night that Laugh-In, some of you people are too young to remember. It was the very first night Laugh-In was ever on television. And so we smoked this marijuana, and we watched Laugh-In, and I thought that they'd done it for me. I thought that they made the show for me. So I was a little self-obsessed. So I started getting high on pretty much anything I could get my hands on, but that was a big, and daily. Now at 14 it started daily. That became, I didn't look at it this way, but that was my profession. I was not, Doug the student, or Doug the child actor, or Doug the guy in a, high school band. It was Doug the drug addict. That was really my profession, and because I spent most of my time looking for dope and getting high, and swearing I would never be like my parents who drank. Particularly my mother, she drank. Well, let me put it this way. Alcoholism doesn't run in my family. It gallops. And it was pretty obvious, all the time. It was fairly obvious. But I got high every day, and I wasn't on any spiritual quest, because I came from a radical Jewish communist atheist family. And my mother, when I was 7 years old, I believe I was 7 or 8, I had asked her a question about God, and she'd said, "Doug, we come from nothing and we're going nowhere." It's kind of a heady concept for an 8-year-old. And truly, she was trying to tell me that what life is, you make life what you make of life. It's not something that you're going to learn in a book, or it's not something that some religion is going to teach you. It's something out of the sweat of your own brow. You were going to, you know, carve this life. And she was meaning to do something good for me, but it terrified me. It just scared me even more, you know, because, you know, I knew I was alone, but then, you know, it was just being confirmed, you know, by my mom. So I was not on any spiritual quest. I wasn't on any spiritual quest. I was just trying to get my skin to fit. And you know, I smoked marijuana, well, the first time. And every single time after that I smoked marijuana, I was hoping to get that same experience that I got that first time I smoked marijuana. But I hated smoking marijuana because it made me paranoid and crazy. But I smoked it every day for 11 years. You know, it seemed normal to me, and I smoked it every day until I discovered how great alcohol was. And as soon as I discovered how great alcohol was, I stopped smoking marijuana and I started drinking alcohol with a vengeance. Now, that didn't mean I stopped doing all the other drugs. I mean, I qualify for any of the A's, you know. Like I told you, I'd be in Glue Sniffers Anonymous, Freon Huffers Anonymous. But when I started to drink, I started to drink. You know, I didn't have a couple of drinks, you know. Set the controls for the heart of the sun. That was me. You know, and I drank with a vengeance from the get-go. And right alongside of my using and drinking career, I had a career. I built this, I chopped this life out of my own life out of my own, you know, with the sweat of my brow, and I got a career. And I got very, very successful in this career. And sooner or later, I was king of the world. And I'll never forget, there was a moment in there. I had a moment of clarity. And it was like that old Peggy Lee song, "Is That All There Is?" Because suddenly I had everything, and I was waiting for the trumpets to go da-da, and they didn't go da-da, and my skin didn't feel like it fit, and no amount of drinking or drugging made it fit anymore. And then I was really stuck. And I didn't know what to do. So I did what I knew how to do, which was drink and take drugs. And it got worse. Over any given period, it gets worse, never better. And about 2 years later, I was sitting in a mental hospital, involuntarily committed. And at that time, 17 years ago, there was no 72-hour hold. I was committed by a member of my family, a wife that I had at the time, who actually didn't want to commit me, but I had an old girlfriend who made her sign the papers. And since she had signed the papers, they could have kept me for as long as they wanted, or at least that's what they told me, and that got my attention. You know, I thought I would just kind of cool out for a little bit. But there was this moment sitting in the mental hospital, and I'm thinking that I'm crazy, and you know, I'm thinking that I'm in the right place. There's a guy in a bed next to me who comes in, says hello to me, takes off his slippers, puts on his shoes, ties them, and gets into bed. You know, and it didn't seem like a weird thing to me. So, you know, I was definitely in the right place. Now, being there in the mental hospital, I couldn't sleep. I'd done drugs, and I drank every single day with a vengeance. Well, I'd say with a vengeance for like 6, 7 years, but every day for 17 years that I'd gotten high. And I found out years later that there's a thing called alcoholic insomnia. You know, we mess up our sleep patterns. So if there's anybody in here who's new and having trouble sleeping, welcome to the club. Because it's a real thing, but I'm also here to tell you that it won't kill you. It won't kill you, and if you will stay sober long enough, that will change. But I couldn't sleep, and I didn't sleep very much, and they wouldn't give me any drugs nor alcohol in the mental hospital. And there was a lady there who would sit up and talk with me. She was a really great-looking lady, and she was there. She had committed herself because she had been traumatized by some blows to the head delivered by a crazed PCP addict who reached in the window of her car as she was driving, and she dragged down the block while this crazed PCP addict tried to yank her out of the little side window of her car. And that had traumatized this woman, and so she was in the mental hospital. A few other things happened as well. And we would sit up and talk at night. And I was there about 2.5 weeks in the mental hospital. And this woman said to me, out of the blue, I thought, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I raised myself up and I said, "No, do I look like an alcoholic?" Now, I'm sitting in a mental hospital, involuntarily committed, and it was an insult to be asked if I was an alcoholic. No, I am crazy, but I am not an alcoholic. Thank you. And she said, "Oh, no, that's not why I asked." She said, "Because if you were an alcoholic, you could go to these meetings that I go to with me, and sometimes I'm scared to go to them alone." And it was like too much to take in all at once. You know, you go to meetings. She said, "Yes, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober for over 2 years." I looked at her. I said, "No, there's no way that you don't look like an alcoholic." She says, "Well, what does an alcoholic look like?" I said, "Well, somebody in a raincoat, you know." I was, and I'm not being funny. I was very serious. I had no idea. You know, she didn't look like an alcoholic to me, but it touched me that she would ask me to go with her because she was scared that she thought enough of me that, now little did I know this was just you guys' way, you know, of tricking us alcoholics into going to meetings. But I said to her, "Look, I'd love to help you out, but I'm not an alcoholic, and I can't go." She said, "Oh, that's okay. That's quite all right." And we didn't talk about it again. Well, about a week later, now I've been in the mental hospital for 3 weeks, and the only things that you can do are watch TV, smoke cigarettes, and do arts and crafts, which is you could make baskets, which is absolutely true. That's a true thing. You know, they let you. Or you can work with leather, but they don't give you a sharp object to help you, sort of stitch the leather through. So it's incredibly frustrating. So if you weren't crazy before you started doing it, you go crazy trying to stitch the leather. It's a terrible thing that they've done. But so I was starting to go crazy, being at the mental hospital for 3 weeks and having nothing to do. And I went to this woman, Pam, and I said, look, I got to get out of here. And they're not letting me out of here. I mean, I got to get out of here for, like, how long are these meetings? And she said, well, they usually are an hour and a half. Sometimes they're an hour. I said, can you get me out of here for an hour and a half? She said, well, I'll see what I can do. I'll talk to them and see if I can take you. And she went and talked to the authorities, because she could come and go. She had voluntarily committed herself. During the daytime, she left, and she had a key to get back on the locked ward. And she could get on whenever she wanted. She just slept there at night. And she went and she talked to him, and she said, yes, they'll let me take you, but you have to go to a meeting on the premises. And as a matter of fact, there's one tomorrow night. And we went to that meeting. She took me to that meeting. And I heard a guy speak. And I thought that my wife of the time had gone and told him about me. And that he was, and now there's a room full of people, but I'm, talk about self-obsession. But he changed everything just a little bit, just enough so that I couldn't, say, see, my wife told you that, he just changed it a little bit, like the drugs he used and the way, he used them. But he talked about how he felt, that he felt like he had a hole in his gut, and he felt like his skin didn't fit, and that he'd been drop-shipped by Martians into his family, and all of these things that I had felt. He told my story. And he said that he had gotten sober, and he was sober for over a year on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he said, I'm sober for over a year, now I remember my friend Pam had said she was sober over 2 years. It done. I said, there's no way anybody stays, didn't have a drink, didn't have a glass of wine, And so anyway, then everybody stood up and said the Lord's Prayer, and it really freaked me out. I mean, it freaked me out. It freaked me out. It was like I was at a coven or something. Rosemary's Baby. I mean, it really was. It was like that, that sound coming through the walls in that movie, and it truly freaked me out. Now, you got to remember, I come from this radical Jewish communist atheist background, and then everybody's holding hands and saying the Lord's Prayer, and it was just, that freaked me out. And I didn't hear anything but a couple of things. The guy had stayed sober for a year, and the Lord's Prayer. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. But I asked my friend Pam at the end of that meeting if she'd take me to another meeting. She said, yes, there's one tomorrow morning at 7:30. And we went to a meeting the next morning across the sort of parking lot from this one. And I heard another alcoholic speak, and they told my story too. But they changed all the details of it. But this time I heard a lot of stuff because I was listening. I was listening just to see what it was about. And I didn't know why. I mean, when I say I don't know why, I know why. But at the time I didn't. And I heard about this book, this wonderful book, and I got it. I bought it, and I read it in an afternoon, and I thought that's a really good book. But something had happened. Something had happened. And they let me out of the mental hospital about a week and a half later. I was there a little bit over a month, about a month and a week. And they let me out under the stipulation that I would go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous or other anonymous programs. And actually, to be really honest, which I'm here to be, I didn't really start out in Alcoholics Anonymous. I started out in one of the other programs, one of the newer programs, one for drug addicts, because I was cool and I wasn't an alcoholic. I was a drug addict. But I started going. And I went, well, after being king of the world, I didn't have a job anymore, you know, and I had nothing else to do. I had no friends, because every single person I knew used and drank like me. And as soon as I stopped drinking and using, it was like you turn on the lights and the cockroaches just disappear. And that's exactly the way that it was. I didn't have a friend in the world. I didn't know anybody other than those kinds of people. I didn't have a job. I had no career anymore. I destroyed that. My family wanted nothing to do with me. The girlfriend that had convinced my wife, who I'd known a month and a half before I married her, to get me committed, when I got sober, she told me, yeah, it's all very well and good, just don't call. And I had nowhere else to go. So I went to meetings. And I went to 2, sometimes 3 meetings a day, every day, for 2.5 years. And thank God I did. God works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. And had I had somewhere else to go, I would have gone there. I'm sure of it. I got sober with a group of guys who were, you know, they had that look in their eyes, you know, that sober look. They wanted it, you know, and I just had nowhere else to go, you know, and I faked it, you know, to be really honest. Kenny was there. He remembers me when I came in, you know, and I faked it real good, because they said, you know, they told me, well, the book says the whole purpose of this book is to help you find a power greater than yourself, a higher power. And that was impossible for me. And they told me that if I didn't find a power greater than myself, I probably wouldn't stay. And since I'd gotten thrown out of every place else in my life that I'd had, it was the only place left. And so I faked it. Because I heard somebody say, fake it till you make it. Just don't drink. And so I didn't. And about a year into my sobriety, I went crazy again. And I went to the sponsor that I had at that time and said, I'm going to kill myself. And he said, oh, okay. Have you tried working the steps? And I had to be honest, and I said, no. I've stayed sober. I haven't had a drink or a drug. He said, well, why don't we try working the steps? And then, if after you've worked the steps, you still want to kill yourself, be my guest. So I worked the steps, and I'm still sober. I'm sober through the grace of God. And I don't add "and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous," because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is the grace of God. And I'm convinced. Now, God is whatever you want it to be. Please don't get hung up on semantics. Don't semantic yourself into the grave. It ain't worth it. God's whatever you want it to be. Your higher power, the great spirit, the divine presence, the earth mother, the whatever floats your boat. Some old timer, when I first got sober and was asking pointed questions that he was trying to answer in a kind way, finally said to me, look, there's only two things you've got to know about God. One, that he exists, and two, you're not him. And, I could do that until that wasn't enough. And through the agency of the 12 steps, I found a power greater than myself. Now, I call it God for lack of a better word. That's all, just for lack of a better word. Do I call it God? If somebody came up with a better word, I'd use that word. But it's God. It ain't me. And it isn't you. It's God working through you. It's God working through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that's outlined in this wonderful, wonderful textbook that we have that tells us exactly how to do it in steps. Somebody said when I was newly sober, the steps are numbered for the intellectuals. And I didn't get it then. Because I was too smart for this thing. I know that. Well, I know that. Well, that's logical. Of course I know that. But here I was, year before, sitting in a mental hospital. That's where what I knew got me. After having been king of the world. So, I have to say that I'm here through the grace of God. Little over 17 years sober. I have not had to take a drink or take a drug. Now that doesn't mean I've been comfortable in my skin all that time. Because I was told early on, it's 8 miles into the woods, it's 8 miles out of the woods. We do a lot of damage when we're out there. I did. And I had a lot of damage to undo. Some of it I could never undo. Some of it, there were people who I made amends to who said, that's very good, don't ever call me again. I don't ever want to see you again. Most people didn't do that. Most people didn't. But some did. There was damage that I'd done to myself. That great career that I'd hewn out of the, universe with my own two hands, I destroyed. And even though I work, that hasn't come back to me like it was. But what's happened through the working of the steps daily? It says, to use these steps in our daily lives. This is, we practice these principles in all of our affairs. This is what it's about. It's about making this program your life. It always interests me when somebody says the spiritual part of our program. What are the other parts of our program? I'm always interested in finding out what isn't spiritual here. Everything about this is spiritual. Everything about what happens here is spiritual. Because we have a spiritual sickness. That's, we're alcoholism. I'm not crazy. I have a disease. It manifests itself as a spiritual illness. And I have certain physical allergies that cause me to have to keep drinking, once I put the first sip in my body, and I'm like that. I have the phenomenon of craving immediately. Happens immediately. I got to get more. You know, you might as well just get the quart of 10 high and the, you know, pound of blow and the 5 hookers rather than the first drink, because that's exactly where it is. It doesn't matter. The first sip takes me there, and then you might as well just dig the hole and throw me in, because that's where it leads. I'm an alcoholic. Thank God I'm an alcoholic, because without my alcoholism, I never, ever would have been introduced, one, to the person that I really am, not that creature I'd created, but the person that I really am. And I never would have been introduced to a spiritual life, ever. I didn't have to. There was no reason that I didn't have to find God. People, well, for me, all I know, for me, I had an imperative. They told me I couldn't stay. I wouldn't get to stay unless I found a power greater than myself. And I didn't want them to throw me out. I had nowhere else to go. But that's the way it had to happen for me. I loved what you, Mindy, shared. You know, every single thing that happened before I got here got me here in the exact perfect way. It was the only way I was going to get this. And I asked myself the question many times, why me? Because there's a lot of guys I know who didn't get it, who are dead. Guys who stayed sober for a long time. And then lost it and then died. Or guys who never got to get it and OD'd before anybody ever thought to mention Alcoholics Anonymous to them. Why did I get to get it? And I know now it's so that I could be uniquely, because I could be uniquely useful to God. And it's not for me. It's not for me. I had my time. I had my life. And I ran it right into the ground. You know, I built, all our lives we sweat and save building for a shallow grave. You know, that was me. That was my whole life, just building a shallow grave. And this last 17 years hasn't been that at all. This last 17 years has been self-discovery. Well, first, discovery of God, self-discovery, and then discovery of others. Becoming less selfish. Because my natural tendency, who I am naturally, is, my favorite number is more. And, my favorite thing is yours. That's, left to my own devices, that's who I am. But I learned something from you. I learned something from you, from this book. And I'm allowed to do something different, and I got a great life because of it. I got a great life because of it. And I don't mean on the outside, although that stuff happens too, and it's up and down and up and down and up and down. It's real life. It's not the fantasy life that I had when I was young, or that whatever it was when I was in active addiction. And because I have a story, and because like those first 100, I have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And I don't mean I'm done recovering. It just means, that phrase just means that I ain't there anymore. I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy I was. I'm not that hopeless alcoholic. I'm a sober alcoholic. And all that entails. Being a sober alcoholic, to me, is the greatest job I could ever have. It's the greatest job I could ever have. It's given me, well, it's allowed me to feel like my skin fits most of the time. That, and that's mostly all I was looking for, was just to have my skin fit. And also it's given me you. Recently I moved. I don't know why I'm telling this story, but I had this friend who wasn't on the program, and kind of like my sober version of a drinking buddy, even though we never drank, just like one of those guys that you hang out with and do stupid stuff with. And when I was moving, I needed some people to help me, and the first words out of his mouth after I told him I was moving was, "I'm not helping." And this is like the guy who was calling himself my best friend, And when I mentioned to people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I was moving, even people that I didn't know very well, the first words out of their mouth were, "How can I help?" Now you go find that at a bar. Alcoholics Anonymous, some people say, I thank Alcoholics Anonymous for giving me back my life. I thank Alcoholics Anonymous for giving me a life. Giving me a life that's worth living. This is a deadly disease that we have. It kills most of us. There's a lot of people in this room tonight. There's a lot more out there who aren't sober that this disease will kill. We're in the lifeboat. I say don't leave because I need you. I need you. And as we all know, I'm a selfish guy. Thanks so much.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.